Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. The day it all began was quiet, almost misleading in its simplicity. It was a Thursday evening, and as usual, I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables while the news played softly in the background. My wife, Anna, had mentioned she'd be back late from work, some vague excuse about a client meeting running over. I'd barely noticed, after nearly 10 years together, little things like that didn't stand out. I had always trusted her implicitly. Our routine was comfortable, predictable even. We both had careers we were proud of, mine in software engineering, hers in marketing. While I worked mostly from home, Anna traveled frequently. She often came home tired from flights, bringing me little souvenirs from cities she'd visited. I knew she was ambitious, and while her work could pull her away from us, I respected that about her. So when she started coming home a little later, a little more distracted, I didn't think much of it. But that evening, I started to notice the subtle shifts. As I was plating the pasta, she walked through the door, phone clutched tightly in her hand. She barely glanced at me, gave me a quick smile, and muttered something about being tired before disappearing into the bedroom. I stared after her, feeling an odd twinge of something I couldn't place, something I hadn't felt before. I brushed it off, chalking it up to her long workday, yet part of me was left uneasy. The feeling gnawed at me over the next few days. I'd catch her sneaking glances at her phone, often with a small, secret smile. She seemed detached. The conversations we used to have over breakfast dwindled to silence, replaced by the flicker of her phone screen. One Saturday morning, as she left for her yoga class, I decided to trust my instincts for once. The moment she was out the door, I headed for her laptop, the one she used for work. I told myself it was just curiosity, maybe a quick look at her emails to set my mind at ease. But it quickly spiraled into something else. Within minutes, I found myself digging through her inbox, scrolling through endless client emails, invoices, and flight confirmations. Just as I was about to give up, I saw it, an innocuous-seeming message from a Mike L. The subject line read, "Can't wait for the weekend, babe." My heart stopped. The word babe felt like a slap in the face. I clicked on the email, my fingers cold as I read the casual exchange between my wife and this stranger. They spoke in shorthand, the kind that two people develop when they share something private, something intimate. Mentions of hotel check-ins, whispered promises, and cryptic phrases like "see you at the usual spot" painted a picture I didn't want to see. I sat back, my mind racing, trying to process the betrayal that unfolded before my eyes. Part of me wanted to rush out, confront her immediately. But another part of me held back, rooted in something colder and more calculating. She had deceived me, used my trust as her cover while she spent her weekends with this Mike. I couldn't let this go, not without making her feel the same pain she'd handed me. But I needed time. If she could play this game so well, then I would need to match her. I closed her laptop, erased any trace of my snooping, and decided I would gather everything. Over the next few days, I paid attention to the smallest details. I noted every business trip, every night she came home a little too tired, every text she typed with that faint smile. I'd always considered myself a loyal husband, but now, loyalty seemed to be the last thing that mattered. Instead, I wanted the truth. I wanted evidence of every lie she'd fed me. And then, almost like fate, the perfect opportunity presented itself. One evening as we were sitting on the couch, Anna mentioned she had an upcoming work trip to Chicago. She had been fidgeting with her phone, barely making eye contact as she explained she'd be gone for the weekend. I nodded, doing my best to appear understanding, supportive even. But beneath my mask of calm, a plan was already forming. Once she was in bed that night, I made a few calls. I set things in motion, securing access to a lawyer who could start the paperwork, ensuring our finances would remain intact. I'd worked hard for my money, and I wasn't about to let her misuse it for hotel suites and dinners with her affair partner. Over the next week, I created a small safety net, locking down accounts, arranging for our house to be legally mine. She had no idea. I played my role perfectly, going about my days as though nothing was wrong, as though I hadn't read her intimate texts to another man. The morning of her business trip arrived with an eerie calmness. I insisted on driving her to the airport, telling her it was the least I could do. She seemed touched, even kissed me lightly before getting out of the car. I watched her disappear through the sliding doors of the terminal, carrying a suitcase that I now imagined full of lies. But as she vanished into the airport, my resolve only grew stronger. I drove back to our house, each mile stoking the anger simmering within me. I had spent years building a life with Anna, investing everything I had into our marriage, only for her to betray me. But this time, I had the upper hand. She had left without a clue of what awaited her return. The silence in the house after she left was like a breath of fresh air, chilling yet oddly freeing. I spent the rest of that day surveying every corner of our home with a strange detachment, as if I were already looking at it through someone else's eyes. I found myself pulling her clothes from the closet, not throwing them out just yet, but laying them across the bed and imagining a life where I wasn't living in this kind of betrayal. The anger, the sense of betrayal, it all sat just beneath the surface, raw and pulsing, reminding me every minute of the painful truth she had hidden behind her soft smiles and gentle touch. The lawyer I had quietly hired weeks before had instructed me on each detail of my plan. By now, I had the power to make a move as severe as I wanted. My savings, our joint accounts, and even the house were practically within my grasp, secured and untouchable by her. It had been unsettling, crossing a line I'd always believed I'd never have to, but with every memory of her betrayal, it became easier. By the time Anna boarded her flight, the die was already cast. There would be no going back. As the afternoon waned, I checked my phone for updates on her itinerary, even though she had mentioned nothing specific beyond business meetings. The audacity of her lies struck me every time I thought about it, but I forced myself to keep calm. I had done the same routine for the past few weekends, running through the steps mechanically, as if I were executing code on an impersonal project rather than dismantling the remains of my marriage. It was brutal, but I felt a cold satisfaction growing inside of me. Evening came, and I poured myself a drink, scrolling through photos from the years we'd spent together, all those vacations we took, the parties we attended. It was almost laughable now, the effort we had put into the appearances of it all. We had seemed so solid to everyone, friends, family, colleagues. And maybe we had been, once. But I could see it now, the slow erosion of trust, the cracks that had gone unnoticed until she stopped caring enough to hide them. All this time, I had been just another fool, convinced that a good marriage could survive anything. Around midnight, as the empty house grew heavier, I dialed her number. I could hear the hum of the airport in the background when she picked up, her voice warm and full of feigned affection. "Hey, love," she said softly, as if she were truly relieved to hear from me. "Just wanted to make sure you made it okay," I replied, forcing a casual tone. "Yeah, all settled in." Her words had the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. "I'll probably just head to bed soon. Big day tomorrow with meetings, you know." "Oh, I bet," I murmured, and she laughed lightly, the sound almost cruel in its falseness. We hung up, and as I set the phone down, I wondered if she had any idea how transparent she had become. It was almost insulting how little she thought of my intelligence, my ability to see right through her. She had traded our life, our home, and my loyalty for someone who saw her only in stolen hours and fleeting touches. I couldn't tell if she was really in love with this other man or if it was just an escape from the life we'd built, but I knew one thing, I was going to make sure she regretted every moment of it. The following day, I set my plan into motion. The first thing I did was contact our bank and finalize the steps to restrict access to the funds in our joint account. I had spoken to them before, but now I pushed through the last of the legalities. With the lawyer's help, I moved everything necessary to an account in my name, leaving only a small amount for appearances. If she tried to withdraw anything, she'd find herself facing empty coffers and locked doors. With that settled, I returned home to pack up her things. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every piece of jewelry she had left behind, all of it went into boxes, packed tightly and shoved into the corner of our guest room. I wanted everything in one place, ready for her when she came back to find her life in ruins. There was a vindictive pleasure in it, one I hadn't anticipated but found surprisingly satisfying. It was a way to reclaim the space she had taken for granted, a space she had tainted with her lies. By evening, I felt almost a sense of calm. She was still out of town, most likely wrapped up in her charade of business meetings, and I had the house to myself. The anger had subsided into something else, a resolute acceptance. She had made her choice, and so had I. That night, I sat down with a glass of scotch and watched the shadows stretch across the walls, filling the room with an eerie quiet. As I sat there, I pictured the look on her face when she came home, the shock, the confusion, the dawning horror. It was a cruel image, but one I held on to. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about showing her what she had lost, what she had thrown away so carelessly. In the midst of this solitude, I realized how much I had invested in a future that now felt like a mirage. All those years of trust and laughter were hollow, and for the first time, I could see that the foundation of our marriage had been eroding for a long time. Perhaps I had been too wrapped up in my work, or perhaps I had trusted her too blindly. But those reasons, if they even mattered, no longer weighed on me. What mattered was that I was finally ready to cut ties. As the hours slipped by, I drifted to sleep on the couch, lulled by a sense of finality. I had done what I could to ensure that her betrayal wouldn't cost me more than it already had. By this time next week, she'd be nothing more than a memory, a mistake that I would leave behind. And for the first time in months, I felt a sliver of peace. But peace is a fragile thing, and as I woke up the next morning to the light filtering through the windows, I knew that the real challenge was yet to come. In a few days, she would walk through that front door, blissfully unaware of the storm waiting to unravel her. I just had to be patient, to wait for her to return from this so-called business trip and watch as her carefully constructed world collapsed, piece by piece. The weekend passed slowly, each hour drawn out by the knowledge of what lay ahead. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was caught between a sense of dread and grim satisfaction, anticipating Anna's return. I had gone over every detail of my plan 100 times, mentally rehearsing the scene that would unfold when she walked back into the house and realized that I knew everything. There was no going back, I had committed to this, and the moment was closing in. Monday morning arrived with an early chill in the air. I felt oddly composed, almost as if I were stepping into a meeting rather than dismantling the remains of my marriage. As I checked my phone, I saw a brief message from Anna. On my way home. Can't wait to see you. The words were hollow, a cruel reminder of the life we had shared, or rather, the illusion of it. I allowed myself one deep, steadying breath and focused on the calm that washed over me. Hours later, I heard the unmistakable hum of her car pulling into the driveway. I stayed seated in the living room, listening as she entered the house and paused in the hallway, no doubt expecting me to greet her like always. I remained silent, waiting as I heard her footsteps approach. "Hey," she called out, her voice cheerful but with a nervous edge. "I'm home." I looked up as she walked into the living room, her smile faltering when she saw my expression. I had expected her to say something, maybe ask if everything was okay, but instead, she just stood there, studying my face, a shadow of unease flickering in her eyes. "Have a seat, Anna," I said, gesturing to the armchair across from me. She hesitated, a flicker of panic breaking through the facade. But she complied, sitting slowly, carefully, as if sensing the precariousness of the moment. What's going on?" she asked, her voice light but forced. I watched her, letting the silence build, feeling her discomfort grow. "How was Chicago?" Her shoulders visibly relaxed, the question clearly not what she had expected. She even managed a small, relieved smile. "It was good. Lots of meetings, long days. You know how it is. Do I? I replied, my voice cold, slicing through her attempt at normalcy. Tell me about these meetings. Her smile slipped, replaced by an expression of confusion tinged with fear. What do you mean? They were just the usual, work stuff. Right, I said, leaning forward, my gaze fixed on her. And I'm sure your work stuff was incredibly productive. Especially with Mike there. The color drained from her face, her eyes widening in shock as her mouth opened and closed, words stumbling but never forming. She shifted uncomfortably, her hands twisting in her lap. I don't. What are you talking about? Don't insult my intelligence, Anna. My voice was low but sharp, leaving no room for denial. I know everything. For a moment, she simply sat there, her eyes darting across my face as if searching for a hint of mercy. But she must have realized none would be found. Her shoulders slumped, her gaze dropping to the floor. How long? I demanded, my voice cutting through the silence. How long has this been going on? Her voice was barely a whisper, each word loaded with guilt and defeat. A few months. I scoffed, feeling a bitter laugh escape my throat. Months. Months of her lying, hiding, and sneaking behind my back while I stayed oblivious, believing in a life that had been shattered long ago. I shook my head, struggling to keep my composure. Why? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. It was a question I'd rehearsed countless times, a question I had thought I didn't care about. But in the end, I had to know, even if it was the last thing I asked her. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes as she tried to find the right words. I don't know, she whispered. I felt trapped, I guess. Everything felt so predictable. I thought, she choked on her words, a tear slipping down her cheek. I thought I needed something more. I nodded, absorbing her words. It was ironic, really, that the predictability she despised was the stability I had cherished. For her, it had become a cage, and for me, it was the foundation I had built my life upon. And now that foundation lay in ruins. Do you realize what you've done? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You threw away everything we had. Every moment, every promise, every bit of trust. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Her remorse was real, I could see that, but it didn't soften the anger coiled within me. There was a time, perhaps, when her tears would have moved me, but now they felt like an insult, a mockery of the pain she'd inflicted. Get up, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. Come with me. She looked up, confusion etched on her tear-streaked face, but she obeyed, rising to her feet and following me down the hallway to the guest room. When I opened the door, her eyes widened in shock as she took in the sight before her, all of her belongings packed into boxes, her clothes, her jewelry, every little reminder of her presence meticulously gathered and contained. What is this? She stammered, her voice thick with horror. This, I said, gesturing to the boxes, is your life now. You don't live here anymore, Anna. You made that decision the moment you chose him over us. Her eyes widened, panic overtaking her features as she reached out to grab my arm. Please, no, let's talk about this. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll end it, I swear. I pulled my arm away, stepping back from her. It's too late for that. You can't undo what you did, Anna. You can't take back the nights you spent with him, the lies you told, the promises you broke. Her shoulders shook with each sob, her hands clutching the sides of the doorway as if holding on for dear life. Please, I'll change, No, Anna. I cut her off, my voice steel. I don't want your promises. I don't want your apologies. I'm done. You're going to take these things, and you're going to leave. She stumbled back, shock and disbelief mingling on her face. But, where will I go? What am I supposed to do? I shrugged, my heart cold, the finality settling over me like a weight. That's not my problem. You've made your bed, Anna. Now you can lie in it. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at me, the reality of her situation sinking in. Finally, she nodded, a broken, defeated nod, and turned away, her hands shaking as she started picking up the boxes, one by one. I watched her go, feeling an odd sense of relief as she carried her things out of the house, each trip stripping away the last remnants of our life together. With every box she took, a weight lifted, replaced by something colder, something that would allow me to move on. By the time she was done, the guest room was empty, the last trace of her gone. She turned to me one last time, her face wet with tears, her eyes pleading. But I simply met her gaze, unflinching, resolute. And then, without another word, she left. The house felt hollow after she left. I stood by the window, watching her car pull away from the driveway and disappear down the street. The silence was deafening. I had imagined this moment for weeks, planning it meticulously, but now that it was here, a strange emptiness settled over me. It should have felt like victory, yet instead, I felt an odd twinge of regret, as if something vital had been torn away. I went through the motions of cleaning up, collecting the stray reminders of her around the house. Her coffee mug on the kitchen counter, the book she'd left half-read on the nightstand, the photo of us at the lake tucked into the frame of the bedroom mirror. I gathered each item methodically, trying to erase her presence bit by bit. But as I placed everything in a box to discard, a nagging thought crept into my mind, a thought that had lurked at the back of my mind since the very beginning of this ordeal. What if there was more to this story? I shook my head, dismissing the idea. But something wouldn't let it go. A strange pull, a feeling that I'd missed something crucial, something lurking beneath the surface. Taking a deep breath, I reached for her laptop. It felt pointless, after all, I'd already combed through every text, every email, every bit of evidence in her phone and laptop. But the urge wouldn't let me rest until I checked it one last time. I turned it on, opened her inbox, and scrolled through the messages again, slower this time, letting my mind linger on each name, each word. And then I saw it, a message from Mike that looked like the others, but had been tucked away in a seldom-used folder. The subject line was simple, confession. I clicked on it, my stomach tightening. Anna. By the time you read this, I'll be gone from your life for good. What we had, whatever it was, isn't worth the trouble it's causing you. I thought I could handle it, but I'm not that guy. I'm telling you this now because I want you to go back to him. He deserves better, and you deserve the stability he gives you. Whatever you felt with me, it was temporary, a fantasy. You know that. The truth is, I never really wanted to be anything but an escape for you. But you have a real life, a good life, and a man who would give anything for you. So go back to him, and don't tell him about us. There's no point in destroying everything over something that never should have happened. Goodbye, Mike. I stared at the screen, the weight of his words settling in slowly. Anna had hidden this message. She hadn't deleted it, she had simply buried it. She hadn't wanted to let go of this man, hadn't wanted to give up whatever she thought she had with him. I clenched my fists, feeling a fresh wave of anger. She had continued the affair even after he had tried to let her go, even after he had urged her to stay with me. But then, scrolling back through the messages, I noticed something else, something strange. The emails with Mike had stopped over a month ago. And after the last message, one that simply read, "Okay. I understand. Goodbye," there was a flurry of other messages, messages I had barely noticed in my rage-fueled search for proof. They were from friends, people I barely knew, and some from family members. They had one thing in common, they were condolences. I clicked on one from her mother, dated a few weeks back. "Anna, honey, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I can't imagine what it must feel like to lose him. Your father and I are here for you. We love you, no matter what. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself, okay? The message felt like a slap. I couldn't process it. What could her mother possibly be referring to? My mind spun as I frantically searched for answers, opening emails and texts, hoping to find an explanation. And then, buried deep within the inbox, I found a message from a woman named Kara. Her name was unfamiliar, but the words hit like a blow. Anna, the memorial was beautiful. Mike would have loved it, and the way you spoke about him, it moved everyone to tears. I hope you're finding some peace. Call me anytime. I felt my stomach twist, the realization creeping in with a horrible, dawning clarity. Mike was dead. He'd been gone for weeks. I sat back in shock, my mind racing as I pieced together what I had been too blind to see. Anna hadn't been cheating after all. She had been grieving. She had buried her lover, struggled to hide her heartbreak, and tried to hold on to a normal life, all while I'd seethed in my assumptions, convinced she had been lying. And when I'd confronted her, accusing her, she had said nothing, had taken the blame because she had known there was nothing left to fight for. I had spent weeks building my revenge, dismantling our life, accusing her without ever pausing to question my assumptions. And now, every step I'd taken to erase her felt like a punishment I'd inflicted on myself. I closed the laptop, the weight of my actions crushing down on me. I had driven away the woman I loved based on an illusion I'd built in my own mind. I hadn't even considered that she might be struggling in silence, hiding her pain to spare me. And now, she was gone, taking with her the life we had shared, leaving behind only the hollow, broken shell I had created. I walked through the empty rooms, feeling the walls close in around me. I had fought so hard to tear her out of my life, but now I realized that in doing so, I had severed something in myself. The truth, in all its twisted irony, was that Anna had been right. I was the one who had made everything predictable, locked us into routines while she had searched for something more. She hadn't been trying to leave me, she had been trying to survive. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind replaying every moment, every word I'd spoken to her, every accusation I'd hurled without a shred of proof. And in that moment, I realized that revenge had never been the answer. I had spent so long planning my victory, I had never considered what it would cost me. The house was silent, filled only with the echoes of a love I'd lost through my own blindness, my own refusal to see the truth. And in the quiet that remained, I felt the depth of my regret, an emptiness that no amount of revenge could ever fill.